We are going to be talking about advertising strategies. I'm going through as many specifics as possible, but talking about where in the world this is all going and how to work together as companies in this new world order. My name is Gigi Johnson. I am an instructor over at UCLA Anderson School's Entertainment and Media Management Institute, and for those of my past students in the room, hello, nice to see you all. I also am president of Marimel Media, which has ended up producing this interesting little kids show called How To Kids. Invite you to watch it online via my friends at Brightcove on howtokids.com with your own children. So I'm actually on various sides of this equation myself. But I'm also on the side of the equation that this is my 4th time at Digital Hollywood in moderating this panel. It's been called Advertising Strategies with the exact same paragraph sitting there. And it's fascinating because 4 times ago, the discussion up here was, we really wish the advertisers got this. That interactivity, all these different technologies would be so fabulous if the advertisers could get it. The second time I did it, we had that exact same conversation. Wouldn't it be great if the advertisers got it? In the spring, we noted the advertisers seemed to get it about 6 weeks before Digital Hollywood this past time. So we've now had about 6 months of the advertisers getting it and creating a massive transformation in perspective. So today, we're really talking about, with all of this change, how do you deal with other companies? How do you make decisions? Where should you place your bets? Where should you not place your bets? What's really happening with all of this? And I'm very proud to have a great panel with different pieces of this puzzle. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves as they go down the table here, because you have their bios in your pack, but this tells you a little bit more about them. But while we're going down the table, knowing we're going to talk a lot about GoogTube or GooTube or whatever you want to call it, I want each person also to mention one other thing that has happened in the past, let's say 60 days, that is a big transformation agent we need to make sure we talk about. Let's start here with Rob.
Hi, I'm Robert Petty. I'm the CEO of Roo. We've been in existence for about 5 years, purely focusing on broadband over the internet and video over the internet. We're about 100 people, and we've got a couple of offices in the US, UK and Asia Pacific. We very much see this as a global market that's expanding rapidly. We're a top 10 worldwide streamer over the internet. We power about 180 websites, a number of them News Corp sites, Verizon and many others. We work with about 90 content providers and many of the leading advertisers. We really provide an end-to-end solution for whether you're an advertiser, a content provider or a website. Probably our greatest achievement is we have got the ecosystem, the media ecosystem working over the internet, whereby we've got a model and a business model where the content providers are rewarded, the websites are rewarded, and the advertisers are getting results. So it's been the 5 years, we've been doing this for 5 years, so a few years ago if we had had this conference it probably would have been 2 or 3 people sitting here, but we've been sticking at it and learnt many of the lessons and identified many of the trends. We're a great believer that broadband will be very, very influential in our media viewing, and we'll see many of the trends emerging firstly in broadband. Probably the biggest trend over the last 60 to 90 days that we're spending a lot of time on at the moment is personal media. There's going to be all these different platforms, this enormous range of content, but how do you make that personal? So the biggest thing that we've probably focused on in the last 90 days is, if I can draw a scenario for you, that you've woken up in the morning and usually you flick the TV onto Fox News or CNN or SpongeBob, depending on the family, and you're usually catching something halfway through a show. So what we're very much focusing on is personalising the media. So when you turn your TV on in the morning or whatever device you're going to, that you'd get your news, that you'd get your horoscope, not the other 11, you'd get your weather, your sports results for your team, but really getting that video experience and media experience concentrated into your personal media. So that's probably the thing that we've been focusing most on in the last 60, 90 days.
Thanks, Rob. Fred?
Hi, my name is Fred Smith. Back in '96, I took an internet ad agency public, Dean Witter DLJ, ran that for a couple of years, Nike, Microsoft, Walmart, American Airlines for clients. Sold it to a high-tech firm sitting on the beach. Started a new venture. New venture is really because of TiVo cannibalizing eyeballs. By 2010, every other ad will be skipped. There's about $65 billion that are going to shift because of another technology shift out there. And the company I started is called IdeaCast. We've licensed CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, ESPN. We send it up to a satellite. We send it down to the nation, to commercial venues. We put in different ads than the ones you're seeing at home. If you're in Spectrum Clubs in LA, when you're on the treadmill, you're seeing my ads that I sell to other people. So I've created a vertical. First vertical is the National TV Health Club Network. I get the swipe card information I pay for, give it to Nielsen, so I'm monetizing commercial venues in compelling content. Most interesting thing that I think has happened, I think about enterprise value because that's what CEOs do. And last week, or it was 2 weeks ago, Anschutz, who has a large position in cinema advertising, with 500 million people going in, 1/3 of the market, filed an S1 for $1.4 billion, and 4 underwriters first year are raising the money.
Great. Tim.
Hi there, my name is Tim Hamlin. I work for a unit of Publicis Group called Denuo, which any of you Latin scholars out there know means anew or afresh. And we have been around for about 7-8 months or so. We are effectively a flank strategy for the future for Publicis Group, which is a pretty bold admission, frankly, that the traditional agency structures of media agencies, creative agencies, promotion agencies, etc., while on a good day maybe innovating pretty well, may not be moving nearly fast enough where the world is really going. And that's no disrespect to our agency friends within the company, but it's just a reality that there are whole bunches of new rules being written about how advertisers and marketers engage with media and how media engages with content creators, and this whole big mosh pit of activity that requires some different approaches, maybe parallel to what the agencies are doing, maybe separately from what the agencies are doing. It just gives us another layer of activity at a corporate level to potentially help foster the things that you were lamenting about before at the top of this top of the show here, about how agencies or marketers or anybody in the middle of that family doesn't get it. I would argue that you're half right. The question is, like John Wanamaker might have mused a decade ago, I don't know which half is the one that gets it and which one that doesn't, because there's equal amounts of arrogance and ignorance out there in this process that is making all of this pretty challenging. That said, it's fair to say that the ad business, in whatever way, shape, or form that it participates, will, I think, be a pretty viable part of how the world of media evolves. At the end of the day, I don't think people are going to want to be nickeled and dimed to death for content. And if we in the agency world do our jobs correctly with better advertising, more targeted, more relevant, and more deferential, shall we say, to the viewer, to the consumer, we actually may be able to help keep these costs in check and actually provide true media value to consumers while actually getting a marketer's benefit across at the same time. So I look forward to chatting about that in the moments to come.
Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Brown. I'm with Nielsen, that quiet company that you've all heard about. We really have striven over the years to be kind of a quiet, non-aligned company that just regularly puts out the audience that's so that the industry can work, buy, and sell, and so forth. Unfortunately, we find ourselves at somewhat of a crossroads or an inflection point. Nielsen cannot be that quiet company, and within the last several weeks, we announced a somewhat controversial move putting out commercial ratings, which we've both been applauded for on the one hand, and some things have been thrown our way on the other hand. But it was our effort to respond to clients that are asking for this information that feel that there's a need for it and that there's an obligation on the part of Nielsen not only to supply it, but to supply it to all parts of the industry. So we've committed to do that. The second thing is we've also committed to make some of the most sweeping changes to our business that have ever been placed on record. That meaning that we are really dedicated to the whole notion that we're going to follow the video wherever the video goes, whatever platform, whatever form of usage, however people are going to consume, be it a video iPod, be it a PC, be it a separate handheld device, we're going to go there and we're going to provide that measurement to this industry in one form or another. And what that really ushers in is kind of a network of relationships that many, many years ago Nielsen did not need to have in place, quite candidly, because we measured television households. And that was the core business that we supplied data for the industry to enable. But now we're talking about measuring not only the core television household, but all the disparate forms of usage that are going to occur. And yes, we take very, very seriously this whole notion of targeted advertising, real-time ad insertion, some of the new video-on-demand schemes that are beginning to unfold. We have to be able to provide measurement to all of our customers because I think Tim and many other of our customer bases expect that that measurement is going to be there in one form or another. So that's what we've been about the last few months.
And that's the big change that you're saying, or do you want to put a change on somebody else's doorstep?
No, I think Nielsen unfortunately has to be a bit reactionary. We can't anticipate in any case where the change is going to lead. Case in point, video on demand. Last year we announced a fairly sweeping, comprehensive video on demand reporting scheme. And quite frankly, as we made that announcement, then the video on demand business really began to change. If you think about a year and a half ago, video on demand was being kind of distributed much the way linear television is distributed with the same commercials and so forth. Now cash deals are being written, shows are being distributed without local or national commercials, and it begins to change exactly what Nielsen measures and how we report it. So I think Nielsen has to be anticipatory, but I think by definition we do have to be a little bit reactionary. The point that we have to stress, though, is speed to market is really key.
Great. Peter.
Peter Kang, glad to be here. I'm also part of the Publicis family. Joined ARC Worldwide in late 1995 or 94. Before that, I owned a company called Kyokin, which was based in Dallas, New York, and London. It was a web boutique back in the heyday in 94, 95. Sold it to Publi Group, unrelated to Publicis, in 2000, and continued to stay on board and consulted for a bit. Started a film production company, which I still own, heavily into video gaming, help design games. I run the world's largest fighting video game tournament in Vegas with my friends called Evolution, with 25 countries participating. And eventually I've been trying to find my way out to California and ended up at Saatchi LA, where Toyota is our client. And I'm really looking forward to working with Danu. And we've got all sorts of tricks up our sleeve in Publicis.
So what tricks or what things for the past month or two have you seen that are big change items?
You know, the great thing about the YouTube-Google merger was that it shed really mainstream light onto kind of all the virtual communities online. You know, there's Second Life, and Pontiac is in Second Life now, and Scion launched dealerships and stuff like that. There's a Korean company called Cyworld, and if there are any Koreans in the audience, like you probably have a Cyworld page. There's features on that system that I think are getting adopted on the Western virtual community sites. So I'm just kind of waiting. Probably like in a month, you'll start seeing features from Cyworld in regular online communities. And Cyworld is very avatar-based. You get like this isometric world, and you can actually buy the latest Prada bag for $1 for your character. And since South Korea is such a fashion-conscious society, they'll buy like, you know, the Prada anklet bracelet for their puppy and pay 50 cents, and the puppy actually walks around in your world, and that's how crazy they get over there. But Cyworld will probably poke up the main awareness line pretty soon. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Walter, you have a different skew on things.
I do, thank you. I'm Walter Schild. I am the CEO and founder of Gen X. We're a Los Angeles-based interactive agency, and we do primarily online media, planning, buying, and placement. Our large accounts there are Honda, WellPoint, Blue Cross Blue Shield, some work from Mattel in those categories. And then we do a lot of web application development, interactive advertising. So that's our main focus. We have been independent and local for the last 11 years. The company started in '95. We have about 130 people in Los Angeles. So that's the background of the company. In terms of, I think, change, I would give more of a year span. I was invited, Gigi, by you last year to speak. And one of the challenges we had a year ago was we were being asked, we place about $20 million in media online a year, to give you a sense of the budgets that we manage on the online space. And we were having a hard time finding properties and media entities to place that media that would be approved by large corporate clients that are signing off on media. It was one piece. The second piece was the ability to measure. Obviously, Nielsen just talked about what they're doing in VOD in some categories. Measure that media. What I underestimated was the overwhelming response from Digital Hollywood attendees to contact me and offer a number of opportunities. And I realized that, number one, I'm not the media. We have a very large media group, and I'm not involved in that area, but I will pass any information I get along to our media supervisors and planners for information. The change that happened this year in the last few months, you touched upon, was the, I suppose, stamp of approval with the MySpace acquisition and subsequently the YouTube acquisitions that have happened. We now have really a lot more interest in even accelerating the spend online for user-generated content and social networking sites. So I even though we were looking to spend quite a bit of money, roughly 5 to 8% of our budgets in these new categories, that is probably now doubled to 20%. And we had a hard time spending the 8, and now the clients are asking to spend the 20. So I'm surprised at the shift. Now, and I will say in terms of the last bit of disclosure that when we bring opportunities to the clients to fund, they're still extremely conservative, the large corporations that we work with, in the funding. And they're concerned about copyright infringement. They're concerned about the quality of the content or the taste of the content, let alone product fit within the demographics of those sites. So we're trying to figure out how we can really gauge that, although they're much more comfortable with Fox and with Google and in other video cases with MSN and with Yahoo than they are dealing with a lot of the different user-generated content sites out there. I think the last piece we're seeing is the overwhelming shift to video. So we have seen a pretty dramatic shift to, when I say everything I'm doing is online, by the way, is to the video needs. So in terms of creation of video, the demand for flash resources, video editing resources, we've probably tripled that area in the last year or so, and we haven't been able to meet demand there. So there seems to be a pretty fast shift to video. It took us, and we've been doing this 11 years now, we've been doing online media buying for about, I think, 9 or so, and the budget's just trickled to get to that. Started with $1 million a year media and it just trickled to get to 10, or to 20 rather, and we're looking at media budgets that will likely double next year into the $40 million range across all the accounts we work on. So if you look at the rapid growth and the demand for user-generated content and video, we're still really, I think, immature in terms of supporting that demand, measuring that demand, trafficking that demand, and then of course they want that integrated creatively with their offline, outdoor broadcast and newspaper activities, which in our case is done with the agency partners they have in the offline space. So.
Any other numbers or measures that the group wants to hand out to the audience as to where we are now, size, scope, percentages?
I'll just add to it's great what Walter's just said there. Shortage of inventory. I just think that everybody keeps underestimating. I did just really rough numbers, but if you could buy out most of the news category, which is about 200 million videos per month across CNN and Fox and NBC and everything, at a $25 CPM, it's around 5 million a month. It's nothing. It's for an advertiser to get excited. Firstly, they won't take all the inventory, but I think it's great what Walter just said, is that the shortage of inventory it's not the advertisers are necessarily slow, the inventory isn't there for them in video at the moment.
That was what I was talking about last year, and of course there was so much inventory that was presented to us, but it was unqualified, it was hard to marshal. I mean, it was all these fragmented sites you couldn't marshal. Another challenge is how do you create all these 15-second pre-roll video spots in your reslicing broadcast, you're creating new things. That was the first part, and now we're in a part where we're creating, in an ideal cases, unique content based on the content that we're sponsoring, and we want to insert those in real time. and we want to insert on IPTV, and we want to insert on VOD. And we're almost treating that now similar to how you would treat a pre-roll video on a web property using user-generated content.
And are we mostly heading to 15 seconds? Because I'm still seeing as a consumer a whole slug of 30-second spots that look an awful lot like the TV ad.
Yeah, and I hope not, because the pre-roll is frankly, I think, I think we've beaten the dead horse here. I mean, it's easy for advertisers to get involved in broadband or online video, whatever you want to call it, by effectively taking another version, digitizing a version of an already existing television commercial. The reality is, TV commercials in an online environment sometimes are okay, but most of the times don't make a lot of sense, right? So pre-roll, post-roll in the middle. I mean, we've been down this road with VOD for some time. I'm more interested. I think that first half of the ball game has been played out. I'm more interested in the second half of how. Look, I advise folks who will listen that as marketers, they should think of themselves as content producers. Okay. By the way, I'm not saying that every marketer or every brand out there, like toothpaste or soap or whatever, has engaging stories to tell in an episodic manner, right? But I am saying, I think if you can give advertisers the hope, the possibility that they too can actually play this content game, it actually gets people to sort of loosen up a bit and make them think that, hey, maybe we don't have to jam it into a 15 or a 30-second kind of environment. God forbid, we could actually create messaging ourselves and then, if you will, syndicate it or populate that out ourselves. So we become almost like content distributors. Now, the challenge, of course, is, does the audience want to hear what you have to say about your car, your box of widgets, whatever it is that you've got? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. But there are a lot of them out there that are still, because their creative agencies are good at 30-second spots, that's all that they have to start with. And that's a real problem. Because the reality is, at least in video, there are lots of digital nooks and crannies out there. Size, shape, form, environments that the video is being served in that, frankly, depend upon much more creative approaches than just simply shoehorning a 15 or a 30 into a pre-roll. So my hope is that we're starting that next generation of thought. I know a few of our clients within the Publicis Group family have been at least around that idea. I think it's still going to be hard because it's easy to just offload a 30-second spot. It's just a simple piece of copy to sort of digitize. But the real hard work is ahead of us, and that's the fun stuff, I think, in the years to come.
Kurt, please.
I think the perfect example of that is the advertising model was 15% given to creative thinking, production, 85% given to media, and to NBC. I think that's going to break, change, allowing the brand to develop compelling messages. Perfect example is Bud TV. I mean, Bud TV is taking $30 million and they're creating content. And I think you're going to start to see the second evolution of not just an ad in a pre-roll, but them trying to realize it's a different format, different medium, and how they're going to take media dollars out of Tony's budget, pushing it into a creative department, and we'll see where that goes. I think that's a great beginning.
Fred, while you're talking, how about location-based?
I think that video, I think all brands want compelling, engaging type of messaging that influences the advertiser. So I think you're going to start to see whether it's mobile phones, whether it's cinema, whether it's in health clubs or wherever it is, it won't be 30 seconds and it will be engaging, compelling messages that will start to drive people. And quite candidly, there's less and less people watching TV at home. They're going to try and get them on the online life or where they're at in their life. And that's what they're going to be. Lots of different devices.
And I just wanted to add on the creative part.
Sorry.
What I think you hear a lot, and this has been going on since the early '90s. This whole kind of integrated marketing buzz
360
phrase that's been happening since I've been in diapers, probably. But for some reason, the last couple of years, it's really come to a head where if you're a large global agency representing billions of dollars of media, then saying that you're integrated is kind of an important thing. I think there's been a lot of talk, not only in Publicis, but in every single one of the major global brands about digital like this word digital being suddenly important. It comes after the crash of 2001. Suddenly there's all these new companies that are media focused, but they have digital outlets. And I run the entire digital group at Saatchi LA, so this is like mobile, video games, websites, all the traditional interactive stuff. And I'm sitting here thinking, like the other day, I was like, why is there even a digital group in the company? It's kind of passé at this point. And for a company to even talk about digital, I think you're just kind of stating the obvious that everyone has known since 1994 when you can dial into a website. So I think from the creative side, you're going to see a major shift happening, and it's going to be kind of like a light switch in the companies that are kind of turned on. And you're going to see people who understand media's role in kind of how consumers consume media now, and people who don't understand that. And there'll be a bucket A and a bucket B.
And I think Chrisman, not to pick on another agency out of Miami, Chrisman really considers it digital content. And they start with an online strategy before they start with the TV strategy. Right. And they flop that. Now, for those who don't know an agency culture, that's a dramatic change because it's been the old blood making, I want my 30-second commercial and I want to go to France to Cannes, Clio, or British Aero. And when your key talent is now making digital content and they think first about the pre-roll, or they think about a game, or they think about other mediums, and one of those falling out of that is a 30-second TV ad, it's going to be considered pushed down like radio or like print has been pushed down. So the big it's coming. It's going to be the creative directors at all the major holding companies have to think about digital content before they think about TV,
right.
Which is a dramatic change.
I think the only last part of the puzzle that the community has to really figure out is, Toyota has about $1 billion and change in media that we spend for them a year, right, out of this one office. It's kind of crazy. And that guy who does that is like a good friend of mine, sits down the hall. So you figure you've got that much media to blow. And if I'm Toyota, I don't really care about the 5% of the money that I'm spending that affects 50% of the perception. I care about the $950 million of TV buying. That's what I want to hear about. So at some point, this shift will happen, and Danu knows all about this, where client value of money versus media behavior is a ratio that will slowly change over time. And I'm hoping that changes in the next 12 months to where next year when we do this, we're not talking about that kind of a ratio anymore. So I think that's the last piece of the puzzle that needs to be solved between agencies and their clients is, get your focus away from the strict dollar amount that you're spending on the media, because the influence you have on the other 5% is probably half of the public perception that you can change.
So what flips the switch? I mean, is it just enough clients that you're losing because somebody else gets it? Or is it what?
Can I add something? Yeah. I just think we're missing something. If Google's shown us one thing over the last 4 or 5 years, it's that they built 4 or 5 whatever billion in revenue, but the majority of that wasn't the Proctors and Toyotas and Cokes. It was activating the small, tiny shop owners and small businesses. Now, I believe an enormous trend over the next year or two is going to be the local tyre shop in Dallas being able to produce an ad for $500 or $1,000 and program it just like you do with AdWords, that I want it to play so many times and it's going to cost me so many times, and they can upload the ad just like, everybody's learned to suddenly upload videos onto YouTube, etc. I think we've got this whole local market that hasn't been in the TV buying space and the media space that could really suck up a lot of inventory, like 20 or 30% of inventory, and it's a bit of a threat because one is they can target, like the technology's there to target it, etc. But the other things is they could drive up CPMs. There's a whole lot of things, but there's this whole segment of the market that hasn't been activated yet, and I think Google's shown us that you combine or activate that segment, and it's an enormous amount of dollars and drain on inventory that could occur.
Right, and I've been kind of waiting to hear about, I don't know if Google's working on this or somebody, but eventually what you're going to find is what we have considered emerging tech becomes very traditional. So like websites and banners are like the, kind of almost the most boring thing you can do right now in digital. But when you look at the landscape, you look at things like a newspaper or like a telephone, and you wonder like how can you kind of get it backwards into technology timelines. So it's kind of like there are websites where you log in and you can call a phone number before you get in the car and you get your route's traffic report, but you don't get it online. You get it on your cell phone, and you configure all that online. So I think it's just a matter of time before like Google or somebody does a major deal with like Time Warner or Comcast and buys out 300,000 cable digital channels of video, where you basically subscribe to your friends, Google videos, but you watch it on TV on your video on demand. Like that should be coming like next Tuesday or something. Like, I'd like that, because then you would really subscribe. You would do a search online, and then you would find 200 user-generated videos of how to build a model RC boat or whatever geeky thing you're into. So that'd be something hard to track down.
Wouldn't be that hard. I think, slightly different perspective. I think the challenge is that whether you've got 30 seconds or 15 seconds, or whether it's 5 seconds. I mean, if you look at the mobile world, and I have Slingbox running on this thing. It's kind of cool to be able to pull a satellite signal in from my home on Slingbox on this. But boy, you chew through battery awfully quick, so you better make sure that the ads are really short form, because you don't have the patience knowing that your battery is winding down. I think technology is going to drive some of the appropriate uses of advertising and the duration of some of the advertising and the hooks that are built into the advertising moving forward. We at Nielsen certainly are trying to look in and gaze into the future as much as we can, because what we intend to do in the very near future is to bring that internet experience, that viewing of television content to abc.com, et cetera, into the reported numbers. We're pulling in, obviously, the video iPods. We've got a 400 home panel going right now. We're trying to learn about video iPod usage, and guess what? Lots of people use it for music, because there's a duration that you have even on your video iPod for watching video determined by the battery life. But we think that the place shifting, the Slingbox technology is way cool, way cheap, about $42 worth of parts for a box that sells for a couple $100 in the industry. They've got a high definition version out just today that I'll have to acquire for research.
Are you shilling for them?
No. It's
Research or tax
it's a cool technology because it just bypasses all the gatekeepers. And that's what I like about it. I admire it. I don't necessarily advocate it.
or measure it.
But excuse me. But the measurement's coming, and I think the point is that what is this industry going to do with all the disparate forms of measurement that are going to emerge? Because what we measure in the television household is very understandable, very fundamental. Tim understands it. Everybody else in this group understands how we measure, what we measure. But when you go to the mobile world, when you go to the internet, and you go to the handheld devices, it's going to be different. And the real issue is, how does a company like Nielsen, or anybody else for that matter, knit all of that disparate information together? Because the metrics will be different, the precision will be different. And that's a huge challenge that we both dread and we also look forward to, because we hope that we're able to solve it, and we believe we will. But beyond that, it's, what is the next step in the generation of technology growth beyond what we know today? And we think, yes, targeted advertising, personalization. I happen to think, and I'm not speaking necessarily for Nielsen, we just announced a games measurement service as well. But I think we believe that there is a possibility that one of the things that we'll measure on into the future is profiles. All of us at some point down the line are going to be creating profiles about what we like, what is relevant to us in terms of the commercials, the content, and it's a pre-post execution sort of thing. And I think there's going to be an exceptional business being able to measure that, whatever the platform is that's being used. Go ahead, take your best shot.
So you asked the question, sort of, what's it going to take? And I don't know if it's a sort of a big sort of supernova of heat and energy, but let me offer a contrarian perspective, ironically. I think the consumer, the person, the individual is really kind of guiding this process along, and I'm not necessarily certain that the players in the media business, whether they be programmers or networks or distributors or agencies or marketers, are necessarily
up to snuff with those people, those individuals. Because if you really think about it, a lot of the behaviors that we're now finally starting to see marketers and agencies and media companies sort of finally start doing after, to your point, since what, 1994, this became obvious to people like us, right? It's about time, right? Well, the reality is that people, and they're not even consumers, right, but people, individuals have been doing things like instant messaging and social networking and file sharing. I mean, things that are not only legal, but illegal in activity, right? And really opening up a lot of people's eyes. Anne Sweeney from Disney last week at MIPCOM in France basically said it spot on correctly. She said that piracy is a business model, okay? And who knows if it's an effective one, but it clearly gives you the zeitgeist that every media entity out there, advertisers, marketers, agencies, media companies, whatever, should be in the back of their minds. That is sort of the worst case scenario, and then you build your way up from that. And consumers, with all due respect, they're not necessarily, I mean, especially except for certain elements of society, right? But the reality is that consumers, I don't think, want to necessarily illegally download a piece of music or a full-length movie or whatever. It's frankly, the reasons why they're doing it is because the system doesn't allow them the flexibility that they want to watch a show that they've downloaded or recorded on their TV set that they could take with them on their iPod because they're going on a business trip tomorrow and they won't be in front of their TV set for the next week or two. They simply just want the ability to, if they saw a show and they think that their relative or their friend might be interested in seeing it, God forbid that they could actually recommend and or send that show to that person so that they could actually enjoy the same show that this person enjoyed. Now, again, a lot of people from a legal perspective and a business perspective say, oh, you can't do that. Well, guess what? Consumers, people, individuals are effectively saying, why can't we? And I think really the answers should be coming out of that, trying to solve that question, that why can't we do these types of things? And again, like I said, I think individuals, people, even consumers will effectively, they want it their way, right? And we have to not only respect that, but we have to be anticipatory of that. Because if we don't speak in their language, they're going to do things in illegal ways that they're going to get them the way they want it anyway. So I really think that's kind of the crucial issue that all of us in this media food chain have to sort of deal with, act upon, and figure out the political niceties and the legal issues and the business issues, but that's really what it's about. It's about serving individuals' needs for content and media and consumption and how marketers target in those environments. And work your way back from that.
And I just wanted to add to that, one thing that's been really surprising looking at just data and metrics for the past, say, 6 months is when you look at things like when a show gets put on iTunes, you can download it. When a show is ripped and, I mean, I download Lost in high def the night it is on show, and I don't watch it on TV. And I load it onto my player and I watch the whole season when it's over because I can't stand waiting for what happens, right? So all this behavior is actually additive, and that's what's been surprising to me is that normally in traditional media, you don't watch 2 hours of TV, you're actually playing basketball, or you don't do this, you're doing this. And with all these new technologies, people are actually just kind of additively adding behavior to their daily life. So it's kind of like, what we're talking about here with, with the Disney comment was really like, somebody's going to download this show, but they're still going to watch the broadcast when they can get to it. They're still going to recommend it to their friend. They're still going to buy a CD. I think, if not everyone in the room, but the majority of us have probably ripped music from a friend's CD into iTunes, or have downloaded gigs of music, right? But last Wednesday, I actually went to Amoeba and bought $200 worth of music just because that's what you do sometimes. And so I think being open to understanding that, like, behavior is going to be additive, and you're not going to get replacement of behavior.
Isn't it just watch what you want, when you want, on what device you want? I mean, if we started with that and then work backwards, is it, you know, Disney's saying this, NBL, I guarantee you, we put a picture of a baseball up in one of our videos and we get the legal letters come in. I mean, the guys that are managing this well, manage it well, but if we just start with watch what you want, when you want, on what device you want, and then we work back from there, it's a pretty simple starting point.
Well, it isn't simple, though, for the advertisers and the agencies. How in the world, then, now that you know that the consumer is doing legal, illegal, all over creation, new media outlets, new trusted aggregators practically every week, how in the world do you make decisions as an agency, recommendations to your clients, figuring out which measurements you should be looking at? I mean, what's the practical elements of working in this world order?
I can talk about a couple of those thoughts, Gigi, versus what the panelists said. I think one piece is we have always done very measurable media, so we haven't had to deal with the lack of measurability from the offline world because everything we've done has always been fairly measurable. So we're not seeing whether it's the video insertions or this online or search or traditional banners, we don't really have an issue with measurability. It's more of the direct response model, which is what's the conversion rate? What's your cost per impression? What's your loyalty rate? What's your repurchase rate? So because we're only in the online space, I think the real advantage that you do have in that narrow area, it's gotten broader, but it's still relatively narrow versus the split for the broadcast buy, is that you can actually do a lot more tracking and accountability, I would argue. We're seeing a dramatic growth in the online spend in search and in video. So I talked last year about the video challenge. Video is still growing pretty dramatically, and we can't get enough of quality areas to buy 15 second to 5 second. By the way, we don't do anything 30-second pre-roll tests very poorly, and consumers end up not liking your brand for sponsoring or getting in the way of it. So we don't do anything in 30, but a lot of traditional agencies have the 30s and they throw them on. So we believe, and by the way, 5-second tests often better than 15-second for some spots. So when we do our testing, 5-second can be as effective as the 15. So we're in 5 to 15. On the search side, we're still seeing search grow at for some clients, triple-digit rate, but certainly a high double-digit rate for all clients. So what that means, and yet overall online is growing. So to sort of net that up, we're going to see a doubling of our total online media spend across all accounts. And within that online media spend, we'll see search nearly triple, and we'll see video, go up 1,000 times, but it's a very small number. And all of those budgets are coming from broadcast buys because of the problem with fragmentation and other issues in the broadcast space. So I think in terms of justification, they like measurability. So we were at a meeting recently at one of our auto clients, and they called us the last minute and said, look, we just pulled $10 million from Spot Cable because we want to drive online buys. We need you to now place the $10 million in online. We want to go for regional advertising. It's in market, Kelley Blue Book, Edmunds, Auto Buy Tells, those markets. How do we make that shift and do it in FY07 and get it live within a few weeks? So those are the kind of shifts that we're seeing. For WellPoint, which is our Blue Cross Blue Shield business, we launched an entire campaign just to capture seniors who are buying Medicare supplemental insurance. They only can sell in 13 states. So great, online I can target the exact states. I have demos for a lot of the sites. I can capture when they're Googling, health insurance, and then we know that they're at this zip code. We send them the targeted link. We send them to a landing site. We tell them their conversions, 3%, and they're thrilled with that versus the direct mail process. So there's a real advantage in that online world, and we're seeing an acceleration, which I thought we wouldn't see at this large level of spend already. At the multi-billions already being spent, we're seeing it accelerate.
And yet, how are you then finding, other than them saying, go to very specific sites that you're already aware of, the plethora of other opportunities, or are you still kind of getting the 80-20 rule? You're commenting last time when you mentioned there wasn't enough inventory, people piled on you. Is it simply, though, that you're aware of the top sites and everyone else is still scrambling for awareness, visibility, and trying to have their biz dev people knock on your door?
What I didn't clarify last time is there's a lack of inventory available on the kind of sites that have the quality of content that these advertisers are comfortable with. and that have an ability for us to measure in an overall campaign or target within a day part targeting. Like for our entertainment marketing, we want to hit box office opening. We want to buy on Thursday and Friday certain inventory. We need to target that day part targeting. They didn't offer that combination. So either it wasn't third party ad served, it wasn't measurable, it wasn't quality content, it had copyright problems. When you net it down to the CNN of the world and the MSN Video of the world, there wasn't enough inventory to buy that, in our case, WellPoint or Acura or one of those advertisers would sign up on. That was the problem, and still exists, actually.
One thing that he's hitting on that makes his situation more rare than common is that you get to a certain scale of agency, and media is anywhere near geographically where the creatives are. They're sometimes in a different building or often like in a different company. Because once upon a time, they figured we'd make more money. Hey, if we make another company, the media guy is in charge of whatever, right? The benefit of the setup that Gen X has, we also have at Saatchi here in California. There are certain offices around the world that do that and different agencies. But what you have is you really want this marriage of kind of creative thinking before executional strategies that happens with media and kind of new media. So the only reason that there is a video game budget at Toyota is because I sit on the same floor as media guys, and I said, hey, you guys are spending this much putting this truck in like an NBA game, and it's really lame, and I'm shocked at how much you spent. So let's get a real budget together to do this properly. And you can't do those kinds of things, again, just being simply media relevant is the key. And I think a really close partnership between kind of idea generation and where the ideas would be seen, it's just like a basic link. And if you don't have that, you can't really take advantage of, he might have some great campaign idea for launching the new Honda, was it?
Acura.
So, when the new NSX comes out, they might want to launch the whole thing on a video game, and the only way to get it is to download it off of BitTorrent or something. I mean, that can't happen if you're not sitting next to the media guys.
It's an important point because about 2/3 of the business we do the creative and the media piece. Sometimes we only do the media piece. Sometimes we only do the creative piece. The problem is that the most effective response rates happen when you've got compelling advertising working together. So we often have a creative concept that requires two units that are together. We need the skyscraper and we need one other combination unit on the buy. We want to roadblock a whole site and have the banners interact with each other, or have a banner interact with a video unit. If the buy was negotiated and upfront 6 months prior, and we don't know where the inventory is going to run, and we don't know the size of the actual IAB units we're delivering, it really hampers the creative. So the most effective response rate is when you actually design the creative intent with the buy, or you have an opportunity presented to you and you actually do custom creative for that opportunity, or you buy media based on that opportunity.
So the real question is, can the agency world get out of its own way in time before the world changes? And the reality, frankly, is that, look, I'm not necessarily certain that's the case, right? The great unbundling that happened of media from creative agencies that had basically played out over the last 10 years. Now you've got sort of these Leviathan media entities that control the predominant spending of ad time, if you will, throughout the world. But what you now have, though, is these silos even more hardened than ever before. And I think, frankly, what the world needs is a little less silo, pissing matches, and more sort of understanding and mutual benefit, pursuing maybe commingled in teams. Maybe it's merging media back into creative. I don't know. I don't particularly care, and I frankly don't think that the marketers particularly care. They just want to get the stuff done. They want to get targeted audiences to hear what they've got to pitch and be able to allow them to follow through. What I worry about mostly is the agency holding company structure not being a smart enough, malleable enough, fungible enough, sensitive enough environment to change quickly enough in the sea of all this stuff that's happening. Because I would argue the bigger you are, the bigger you are. And I don't think, profound, right? I don't think there's a certain nimbleness, frankly, that's required. I mean, with all due respect, I think it's terrific. You've got the big media agencies that handle the predominant share of broadcast television, cable television, and network radio, and print, and all these things. But in the world where there are all these other media forms like RSS feeds and podcasts and social networking and peer-to-peer file sharing, I don't know how you buy that stuff. I mean, we have some ideas, but half of this is not about buying anything. It's about what is it, first of all, then how do we create for it? And if you basically have a machine that's all about buying, they can't spend any time listening about all this other stuff. And that's the problem. That's a very big problem. And I frankly think marketers and agencies need to mutually call that sort of dysfunction out and recognize that there's a new sort of mindset that's necessary here. And I just think, frankly, the structures that both the marketing side and the agency sides have today are antiquated in a new world of different activity. And I see some changes happening on both sides of that fence. I don't see enough of it. And that's what I'm concerned about, because at the end of the day, advertisers will start finding their own solutions, whether they do it themselves, find other unique new agencies or new entities, or companies like Google go directly and there's no intermediary. Okay? Now, the irony there, though, is in the last point, I'm sorry. The irony there is that with all this stuff that's happening out there, all the more need for some level of sophisticated hand-holding and guidance through all this stuff, because not everybody knows what the hell's going on. But then again, I would argue the agencies shouldn't sit back and say it's all going to flow through them. It ain't necessarily so.
Tim, I'd like to add on to that. I think that's right on. The interesting thing about the average television household is they're up to 8 hours and 12 minutes of consumption a day. That's amazing. I mean, if you stop and think about it. If you look at how the kids are all consuming, and some of my kids might have done some of that file sharing stuff that Tim was talking about. The tools exist. Many of them been taken off the internet sites, but you can still get at them. If you want to carve up content, you want to transport it to your friends, you can do it. It's not that hard. You can rip DVDs. It's easy. It's a piece of cake. I think the real issue is, how do you relate all the different forms of usage, the podcasting, the ripped stuff, the legitimate stuff, the on-demand content, you name it. How do you relate that all and understand and have a picture of what is working and what works for each of the various targeted audiences that you have? Because it's going to be a very, very stressful dynamic trying to understand what that mix is. And I'm not telling you something that you don't already know or you're not already aware of, except that the road of technology is a speeding train. It's moving so fast, things aren't going to get better. They're going to get more difficult. In terms of the overall challenge to the industry, from a Nielsen perspective, from a buyer-seller perspective, it's just getting tougher. Now, the good news is digital provides a lot of tools, and we're going to try to camp on those tools to provide some measurement and understanding. But I think, the point going forward is that this media marketplace, it's got vested interests, and the media marketplace has vested interests in those that are the content providers and the consumers and so forth. And people have to be aware that change is happening so rapidly, whether you like it or not. Nielsen has to be to the measure, or some other companies have to be to the measure, so you can understand the increments of change. It's not going to happen overnight.
I'd like to add one more point. I was down at the ANA conference. Those who don't know it, it's the conference for all advertisers. The CEO of Procter was speaking. There's a conference sometimes called agency relations. It's between the advertisers and the agencies. It's about the compensation. The compensation 15 years ago was 15% based on media. Now it's an hourly rate. They don't really allocate any time for an agency to spend on this. So they grind the numbers down and they crush the agency budgets. So it's very hard for an agency to say, I'd like to investigate podcasting, because there's no budget for that. But getting back to the who's going to flip the switch, as more and more TV commercials are skipped, the CEO of the brand, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, is going to say, I don't want the money on network TV anymore. I want to allocate a budget. I didn't want to be Amazon. I didn't want eBay to cannibalize my business. They're going to say, I do not want this video purge that's about to happen. I don't want to get cannibalized by TiVo, and I want to spend money in podcasting, gaming, and I'm going to allocate a budget to my agency, who's my strategic partner that does all my strategy and does all my content in brand messaging, and they'll give them a budget. The problem is no budget from the brand, but second CEO said, go do it. They'll be allocated a budget like they were with the internet.
Close, the single biggest trend we've changed we run a network, and so I'm not from the advertising side. Our job is to provide you with the thing. The single biggest thing we've changed is that with the 15-second pre-roll, and we stick to what Tim was saying, that's really a commodity. But we've got accountability too, and I think you've got to lean on guys like us. That things are changing every day, but the number one thing we've changed in the last 90 days is instead of sitting back waiting for a pre-roll order, we're sitting there saying, well, we're seeing this trend on this particular content on this particular site. Get out to the advertisers, don't wait for them to come to us. Go to the agencies and say, listen, here's a $1 or $2 million project. And it's been an enormous change. I mean, the amount of these we're rolling out at the moment, where it's a $2 million project, and it's, we've got 5 roadblocks going on at the moment, I think, where a roadblock is where the advertiser comes in and takes the whole site, every single bit of inventory, their dedicated videos and that, but we've got accountability because we do have the tools. I mean, Scott can grab the whole industry, but we know exactly what content's being watched on exactly what site in the last 5 minutes. We know that. And we've got to be hitting the agencies and saying, look, this is what's going on. It might be an idea here, and then the creative guys in the agencies kick in. But we've been, week after week, every second day, we're putting one of these down at the moment. And they're big deals. We provide the inventory, the whole, as much as we can about that, and if it appeals to the advertisers. But we should have accountability. You guys are being pretty hard on yourselves as agencies. But I think the media guys, this is changing quickly, and we know what's changing. We've got to be feeding that information into you, and you guys come up with the creative ideas.
So speaking of information to feed, what information can we feed to you? Do you have questions for our panel here? Yes, right there. Mm-hmm. And please say your name and your company affiliation.
Okay, my name is Julie Ballard-Lee of Ballard Executive Search, and my question is to Walter, Peter, and to Tim. In yesterday's Wall Street Journal, there was an article about wanted online media expertise. Madison Avenue finds limited supply of talent that can drive web ads. And it goes on to talk about how the lack of digital talent is making it almost, very difficult to spend all the money that your clients have given you to advertise. So what are you guys doing? Are you cannibalizing each other? Are you growing your own, training your own? Or are you going to traditional media outlets and hiring the old expertise and bringing them into the new?
I'd like to start. This one is really close to my heart, actually. So I started Keogan in New York City in '94. This is when IO360, Hurricane, Razorfish were like all 5 people offices, right? Mm-hmm. What happened was 2001 happened. And if you're in the city when the buildings went down, you kind of realize that was really the end of 20-year-olds making $200,000, not having a degree, right? That ended that day. And then what happened was that entire workforce, which was not actually that large, we're talking about people who started in 1995 learning Dreamweaver and learning Debabilizer. These are ancient programs, like you make, websites like 1.0 websites. And that limited workforce didn't have any sexy boutiques to work at anymore, so they all went client-side or turned into painters or musicians or stockbrokers or whatever, surf. That's what they do. So literally, when I look at the talent pool, I think everyone here who has a hand in creative production, including the audience, you can probably count on your one hand the number of production companies you would actually hire to trust. Who would you give $1 million to make your website for your company? There's probably 2 people on your list, and it gets smaller every day. So that limited workforce of those hot creatives that built the internet as it is today, like my business partner, created the first pop-up website. Nobody knows that, and we found Future Splash before it became Flash, right? So there are very few people who go back in time that far. And unless you knew that, it's kind of hard to really understand how the media opportunities really play with interactive. And And so, especially on the West Coast, there's a hard talent pool here. It's just hard. There's not that many people. And again, on my one hand, I can count 3 companies that if I won the lottery and I wanted to start businesses, I'd probably call one person, and it'd be my ex-business partner and nobody else. So that article talks about there is a severe lack of digital talent, and there's no boatload of them coming from anywhere right now.
Some of them are coming from UCLA Anderson School, but I must admit that
Actually, let me jump in on that, because the real challenge is that I actually think we do need more MBAs, we need more quant jocks. I mean, at least on the media side of the equation, right? With all due respect, the business of advertising is becoming infinitely more sophisticated than the heritage has led us to this point. And while I'm not saying creativity or liberal arts graduates or any of that kind of stuff is not needed in the business, it certainly is, probably more than ever. It needs to be buttressed and or supplemented or augmented, frankly, by people with mathematical skills, the ability to do algorithms, the ability to sort of search engine optimize. I mean, these are all terminologies that if you go to the people who have been in the agency business for 10, 20 years, they look at you like you got horns coming out of your head. I mean, the reality is that it is more sophisticated now, and because of that sophistication, both not only on the buying sides of things, but also on the selling side of things, I think that article was more about sort of web companies and their ability to sell and whatnot. I'm fearful that on the buying side, those intelligent people supposedly that are trying to look at all of the opportunities out there and help marketers through all of it, I think there is plainly a lack of sophistication in terms of our ability to crunch data, the ability to do all these kinds of sophisticated analytical types of behaviors that effectively was pretty much an art. Previously. It is still a little bit of an art, but it's much more of a science, and that usually attracts different types of people. We need to be more successful in attracting those types of folks to the mix, and by the way, we need to probably compensate them a little bit better than what we've been doing, because the reality is that the ad business is, I don't think, as sexy as, say, working for Google or working for some of these other hot startups. And the challenge is, how do you attract that talent? Well, frankly, some of that has to be, make it worth their while. And it it shouldn't be a surprise that some agency people or people just eschew the agency business altogether because they see the opportunities more directly in front of them in other environments like entrepreneurial startups or Googles or Yahoos or
biz dev. And that was what I was going to also comment on, that I was accosted by several companies last night commenting, we need biz dev people, and so they're going to those jobs instead of necessarily going to the ad side. There was a hand back there, the blonde lady.
I have a question pertaining to IPTV. Could you please comment on what you are doing with IPTV, what you plan on doing with IPTV, because telecom service providers suddenly count on you to be large source of revenue.
Yeah, we're doing a lot in that right now. We're working with Comcast. We're building one of their IPTV channels and VOD channels right now. We're working with some other providers in IPTV. So it's a big part of our business is the video space. We've done a lot of projects for Disney and some other providers. One of the things that I think will quickly blur is the definition of IPTV versus VOD versus something else. We're really seeing a merger on them. The channel we're working on with Comcast is, simultaneously, it's everything. It's IPTV, it's VOD, it supports user-generated content. It's a combination of all of those pieces. And there are a lot of startup providers out there in the video space that are pretty exciting. One of our clients is Rever, which is a video generation and distribution network. So my point with that is that we expect the same gatekeepers like Comcast and others to be able to power IPTV, but it's also an equalizer because anyone could start an IPTV channel. And that's something that as an advertiser, they're not comfortable with, an individual or an unknown entity's IPTV channel. But Comcast certainly is someone who has the ears of major advertisers, and they'll go to Comcast and buy content that they're creating on IPTV or user-generated content that Comcast distributes, which is why Google is now pretty powerful because they're essentially certifying that they're cleaning up YouTube, and we're going to go to Google and do big video deals with Google that we would never do with YouTube.
I was talking about walled garden IPTV.
I'm the opinion that the walled garden approach isn't going to be a long-term phenomenon. In some countries and in some locales, it's worked. AOL has obviously bet their whole business on getting rid of the walled garden, and they're moving on the ad support. There's so much money in advertising, and I think there's a lot more money in the advertising-supported networks and video than there is in the subscription side or walled garden piece. There are some notable exceptions in some very interesting categories. Not necessarily TV, but Consumer Reports, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. There are some very valuable content networks out there that we pay a very high CPM because we want to reach certain people paying for content. We want to know their demos and their subscriber information. So we'll go out to the Wall Street Journal with the paid subscriber in the walled garden section, and we may pay, I won't quote numbers, but what I think is an astronomical CPM, but the response rates are good and the clients are asking to pay very high CPMs that I'm surprised in some cases they'll pay within the walled garden.
Interesting you say about walled gardens, because it's I don't see the mobile industry actually heeding your words. I see the mobile business, for example, whether it's video or otherwise,
Good point, yeah.
creating a repeat of what cable did with video on demand in the early days, and frankly, I don't think they've still recovered from it. Creating a walled garden is clearly not the way to do it. If I'm a content owner and I want to distribute my content, I need to be relevant and available across as many different touch points as my viewers or my consumers want me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that has to go through somebody's pipe. That may be filed shared between people. But anybody in the mobile business, if you can help me figure out why the carriers are trying or hell-bent on trying to create walled gardens and then trying to sell advertising themselves versus what you just said, which I think is correct, it beats the hell out of me. But I hope it doesn't happen, because they're going to be in for a long, tough struggle for a real business if that's the case.
I have a last question here myself, which is I'm sheepish about this because I'm always going, we're so U.S.-centric in these panels, and I've let us do the exact same thing again here. International bellwethers, things that you're seeing in international markets that give you a glimmer of hope, depression, ways things are being done differently that we should or could be looking at.
Can I start on that? With the accent it's probably
That lovely accent from, where's that from?
It's Australian originally. What's been really interesting, we took the attitude very early on that as soon as you're up on the internet, you're global, and it's global broadcasting, and we're probably out of the big media companies, we're probably a bit of a fan of News Corp because they've really got the infrastructure down. The biggest surprise we get, we're doing a lot in the UK, we're doing a lot in Asia Pacific, and we're not fully down in Hong Kong or Singapore yet, but we're moving in there now. But every media company, every newspaper, every high traffic website is thinking about video, and this is in the web area, so sorry for cutting a few of the other areas, is thinking about it right now. It's not, the US isn't more advanced, less advanced. Everybody is thinking about it right now, and some of the other countries are actually better prepared because they've got fibre down, etc. But the trends are happening everywhere. The advertisers are probably a bit slower in the other countries, but the CPMs are a lot higher. Like the CPMs in the UK are double the US, at least. So that's one of the key trends there, but every content provider, everybody worldwide, the trend's hitting at once. And I think the biggest shake-up that we're going to see is it's not just the cable guys are running their walled garden. The media guys here, I think, are in for an enormous shock. The guys that are only concentrating on, NBC's concentrating on competing against CBS, and CBS is concentrating on competing against ABC, etc. The biggest threat to the media shake-up here is going to be the international media coming in, and the media guys, especially in the US, should be working out how they're going to attack and gain market share overseas, because it can be really world-shaking on things like sport, where, especially in the US, where the NFL, the baseball, and NASCAR and things like that. There's all these sports that can instantly be broadcast into the US and take market share from that and upheave them, that can start taking sponsorship, start taking advertisers. What's also interesting is we control some very big high traffic websites in the, not control, but power, some very big high traffic websites in the UK. And it's the same with the US, that often a lot of the websites in the US, 20% of their traffic's coming in from international. And in the UK, we're seeing the same. 20% of their traffic could be coming in from the US. But we've got to learn that when someone goes onto the Times site in London, that we can show them Lloyd's bank ad if they're coming in from locally, but American bank, Bank of America ad when they're coming in from the US. But everybody's got to start thinking globally, and it's a big, big barrier that we're finding at the moment.
I see Peter nodding.
I agree.
I'll add one other. Oh, go ahead.
I spoke about this in the last session that, part of when you look at content, from the content side of things, that, my nationality is Korean and South Korean, and when I hear about what my friends watch and do in Korea, 97% high-speed broadband penetration. Most people use their phones for TV and texting instead of talking. Just strange behavior, right? And it's easier in kind of homogeneous societies to kind of dictate, we're going to have this kind of technology because we know the kind of behavior that's going to happen. Therefore, we know what kind of content to design around the technology. You come to America, everyone's talking about walled gardens. There's a reason why there's like Sprint, T-Mobile, blah, 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 blah. Is because, Americans are kind of weird. Like, we're all crazy. There's freedom, and you can kind of do whatever the hell you want to do. So I think there'll be patterns of behavior around technology that are very similar in homogeneous societies. But you come to a place like America, the benefit of the kind of society that we have is you're not going to get the mixture of kind of the content you'll get from America. And I think that's at least what we've been focusing on at our agency is trying to tie into that. What is the mixture of content that's going to be relevant to the market segment that you're after?
The odd comment I'd bring up about this is I think there's going to be a larger shift change between CEOs internationally that have brands that really want to get disposable income of the US consumer that uses the internet as a tracking mechanism to create sales or an ROI from China bringing in a product right to the US and having a Dell model in reverse. And I think you'll start to see more international brands advertising to get that disposable income and get delivery right to their home. I don't have to go to a Walgreens or a Walmart to get a great price. Why give Walmart my money? I can go to China, get it directly, and the Chinese manufacturer will advertise to me, and online, I'll hit it, I'll buy it, and it comes to my home. So I think there's going to be far more shift changes than we're ready for in regards to international.
That's already happening with pirated videos from Malaysia.
It is. There might be legal
I can
problems.
see that for digital content. We're not seeing in the near term the globalization of media or budgets or marketing. The organizations that are global, they're very fragmented and political in each market, and it's extremely unusual to have a global buy, even for big global brands. But I'm interested on the comments that my colleagues on the panel made, is that in theory they'd be much better off if they're doing what you're talking about, if they would execute there. But I don't see it happening for many, many years. We're certainly seeing fragmentation within global brands on a per market basis.
Well, why don't we start from your end for a final question, which is, what do you see coming over the horizon? What's the thing that's coming up next that may not be on everyone's radar screen that we need to think might be coming over the horizon in the next 6 months?
Well, I don't know if I'm in that profound. I see two pieces. One is on the marketing side, I see a move back to the integration that you guys in the panel have talked about. Instead of specialists that are in separate companies buying the media, planning the media, doing the creative, doing the web, doing the outdoor, we're seeing the strong shift back to integration, creative ideas across all medias. And we're doing a lot at Gen X to work in that new model, which we think is happening quickly. And then the second piece is we're trying to find ways to bring the level of measurability we have in the search and banner space into the video space, because the move is pretty strong. We have to support video, search, and banner integrated, and then do that in an integrated marketing fashion with offline media.
Great. Peter?
Again, apologies if anyone was in the previous panel that I was talking in, but I'll pitch this company called MyWaves. They're kind of a cool company. It's basically like YouTube on cell phones. So I think like the immediate next 3 months, either them or some larger file sharing network on cell phones, mobile, is going to be kind of a cool thing. I'd like to use that today if it was working really well. Yeah.
Cool.
I think from a measurement perspective, I think what's coming is that Nielsen is going to have to begin to use outside data sources to populate its business model. We've been good at using homes that are part of our panel that we permission, that we have a relationship with, but we've been processing TiVo data for a small 10,000 home panel for quite some time. We've begun processing VOD data for some of the MSOs. I think that's going to continue. There are just more devices out there that have the ability to create user data, and Nielsen's going to have to accept that data, try to legitimize it, and then again, back to the story of trying to knit the data together to provide a compelling story. And I think that's, in many ways, our future moving forward.
Thanks, Scott.
I don't know what's coming down the pike, honestly, but whatever it is, Apple will probably be enmeshed in it.
Yeah.
So watch out for them.
Okay, Fred?
With the YouTube at 1.6 and with the cinema industry at 1.4, there's a lot of investment bankers that like 7% commissions, and they'll give you capital. And I don't know what the next thing will be, but they'll give you capital.
This is a bit controversial. I think the computer powering your TV is going to come far faster than anybody's imagining. It's going to be a sub $99 device that'll be released in the next 6 months. By December next year, I think you'll be absolutely surprised at how much you're watching on TV, or how much is available to be watched through your TV by performing a cable bypass. And the quality is there now. The 700, 800K. Viewing through your plasma and everything is but this is going to come on a lot faster than everybody's imagining. By December next year, it'll be a big part of our lives.
Excellent. Please help me thank our panel.